You know, I had a good time in my job at Paramount with all the manic fights that went on, and I look at that to a degree. My experience at studios, I went from Paramount, I worked as an executive at MGM, I was president of Lorimar Pictures. It was like a fascinating passage through the 60s and 70s, a time of wonderful change and excitement. And I look back at that era, that was a great time to be around. I was thrilled that I was around there. So my recollections of people and incidents tend to be colored by perhaps that absurdly not sentimental. I'm pretty tough-minded about it, but I think there were really good times. Good times for pictures, good times for people. At the time, Evans and I were very anxious to break away from the club, the Hollywood club. Too many of the pictures that Paramount and every studio was making had the old school directors and producers. I mean, a prototypical picture, you know, Hal Wallace would produce it, Henry Hathaway would direct it. And both Bob and I were anxious to break out of this fraternity and to bring in some interesting young filmmakers. Hence, relationships with Francis Coppola and other Francis Coppola, Peter Bogdanovich, Billy Friedkin. There were a number of bright young people that we were bringing in. At that time at Paramount, it was Roman Polanski, who, if ever there was someone who didn't get along with a studio, who was totally obsessed with his own vision of how a picture should be presented. When you think of Roman's problems, his star, Mia Farrow, was married to Sinatra. Sinatra came in and said to Evans and to me that unless Mia is limited to 2 takes, she was averaging like 25 or 30, that Sinatra said, your health will suffer significantly unless Mia Farrow does no more than 2 takes on Rosemary's Baby. Now, that was, and Roman, his response to this was, well, fuck Frank Sinatra. And in the middle of the picture, Mia divorced Sinatra over this issue. The studio was beginning to make pictures that were somewhat daring and innovative. And the marketing guys, distribution and advertising, were really of a different epoch. Now, one way that I got around this was somewhat controversial within the company. In the case of several pictures like Goodbye Columbus and Rosemary's Baby, I went to an old friend of mine named Stephen Frankfurt, who was a brilliant young guy. He was 29 years old, the president of Young and Rubicam. And we outsourced the campaigns for those pictures. So several of the best, most successful pictures that we had were outsourced. Needless to say, the ad people within Paramount were furious about this. And they succeeded in briefly getting me fired for outsourcing the advertising of the company. But the ad campaigns that were produced were so brilliant that within hours I was rehired at a higher wage. But there was real civil war within the studios at that time, because a different kind of movie was being made. You look at the campaign for Rosemary's Baby and you can see, okay, this was a picture we basically forced on them. And the campaign, the Pope Pray for Rosemary's Baby, was a brilliant campaign. And the same was true of Goodbye Columbus, which was a comedy, but it was a more traditional comedy. But the campaign was great, and it was a big hit. They had grown up with, there were Elvis Presley pictures, you know, The Sound of Music. I mean, there was a very orthodox kind of picture framework that they fit into. And all of a sudden, you look at the list of Paramount pictures, they didn't understand any of them. Can you imagine how a sort of hidebound marketing guy in New York, when he sees Harold and Maude, how they would respond? I can tell you how they responded. They couldn't come up with a campaign. So basically, Harold and Maude opened with a Tombstone ad. It just said, Bud Cort, Ruth Gordon, Harold and Maude, directed by Hal Ashby. That basically was the ad, because they were absolutely thrown by this. That was the fun of it, you know, for someone, and Evans was this way too. I mean, for someone who really wanted to defy the system, which I enjoyed doing, this was delicious sort of combat. I can give you examples of directors that from day one, I mean, you take Blake Edwards, made a picture called Darling Lily, which was a bomb. And from day one, I hated Blake Edwards. and it was constant war. You look at a picture like another comedy of that period, A New Leaf. Elaine May directed it. When she turned in her cut, Evans and I literally, we took the picture and we assigned it to another editor, and with the instruction, the script was great, the movie sucks, recut it according to the script. Elaine May filed suit. So that was the kind of thing that was going on now. So much resides in terms of a director's career and how he presents himself, the projects he developed, his agents, the contacts he makes. And I know, even after the nightmare of The Godfather, which was combat all the way through, Francis Coppola made it a point that he and I still were friendly and connected. And Peter Bogdanovich and I, to this day, still frequently can talk. On Medium Cool, Haskell Wexler took a very tough position about, it was a movie about the Democratic Convention of '68. And the Democratic Party was depicted in an unfavorable way. And this picture was made under a fascinating cover, because there was a picture that Haskell was going to shoot. And he called me from Chicago and said, "You can't believe what's going on. The Democratic Convention is chaos. I could make a far more interesting picture shooting a story about the Democratic Convention than I could what we originally planned." But this picture, which ultimately became Medium Cool, would never get approved by a studio. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to go out and shoot this picture. And if you want to stop me, tell me right now. But if you hang up on me, then our little secret is that I'm shooting the other picture. So I hung up on him, and he went and shot the picture. And when the picture was done, I didn't know this, but the chairman of the board of what was then called Gulf and Western, which later became Paramount, he was one of the top financiers of the Democratic National Committee. And his position was, let's not release the picture, because it depicts the Democratic Party in an unfavorable way. And he said, further, I happen to know that both Evans and Bart are not liberals, which happened to be true, but that was irrelevant. We made the picture because it was a good picture, not because it was antagonistic toward the Democratic Party. But he succeeded in putting certain constraints on the release of Medium Cool, which we were keenly aware of and which hurt the picture. Today you really do have studios that are run by multinational corporations. And the environment of picture making is very corporate. Endless control groups and meetings about the content and the ending and everything. In that era, none of that took place. So once again, I think that people of that time had it easy relative to today. I served 20 years as editor of Variety. There are a lot of people who hated me for things that we put in Variety. But I don't want to sound crusty, but you know something? It doesn't bother me. It goes with the territory.